Given the huge rule changes for the 2022 season, people could be forgiven for thinking that the rules stay exactly the same moving into 2023. In this video, I'm just going to go over 10 rule changes that you should be aware of going into the new season. Please do make sure you're hitting the like button on the video and also subscribing to the channel for more Formula One related content. So I saw this article on F1.com and I thought I'd just share it with you guys and also walk through some of the rule changes. Some of them are directed at the porpoising issue that we saw primarily at the beginning of the 2022 season, but there are other things affected as well. So the first thing that we've got here are ride height and diffusers adjusted. In short, 4 additional changes will come into play this year. Floor edges have been raised by 15 millimeters. The diffuser throat height has been raised. The diffuser edge stiffness has been increased. And an additional sensor has been mandated to effectively monitor the porpoising phenomenon. You know what I'm saying. So that basically seems to suggest to me, anyway, that the floor edges are raised, but also the diffuser throat height has been raised. So I think that's to do with the front of the floor and the air going under the car. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this. And the diffuser edge stiffness has been increased. Sometimes we did see a lot of flex, and you had also the stays from side pods put on to the floors as well. Maybe it improves that whole situation. And an extra sensor for the FIA Formula One, no doubt, to be able to monitor what's going on with the porpoising. Stronger roll hoops after Zhou's crash. Alongside the changes aimed at porpoising, there are tweaks to the safety standards of F1 car roll hoops. The 23 technical regulations now state that a rounded top is required on the roll hoop, which will reduce the chance of it digging into the ground during an accident, while they also ensure a minimum height for the point of application of the homologation test. So that's a really good thing. Now, unfortunately, in the past, in Formula One and in a lot of things in general, there has to be a serious accident, sometimes ending in a fatality, before lessons are learned. It looks like, while not strictly proactive, they have kind of been proactive with this and looked at Zhou's crash, looked at what they can do to change things, and they are putting some measures into place for the homologation. Additionally, there will be a new physical homologation test where the load pushes the roll hoop in a forward direction. So they've added another test. So if you don't know what homologation is, this is a general term used to sort of standardize a car. So they've got the set of regulations, and when they homologate it, something is to be built at that standard for the rest of the season, and homologated. That is what it means. So they'll have homologation tests for different parts of the car, and when it meets the test criteria, they homologate to that level, and it's in different series as well. There might be someone with a better explanation. That's how I understand it. But once you pass the tests, that's the standard you can build to from then on. And previous tests that may have failed, they don't get homologated, obviously. F1, so a reduction in the minimum car weight. This is moving from 798 kilos to 796 kilos. I could be incorrect, but I feel like a kilogram is like a tenth or two, isn't it? That they normally quote. So lap times might get a little bit faster. But then again, with the changes to the aero, like what we discussed in point 1, it might not make that much changes. But if any of the cars were still heavy at the end of last season, then it might affect them. We all know, or think we know, that the Red Bull is particularly light and down there. 4, revised mirrors to improve driver visibility. Following tests by Red Bull and Mercedes in Hungary and Belgium, respectively, the entire grid got involved in the Dutch Grand Prix, you might remember it, and changes have now been written into the regulations. This is increasing the reflective surface by 50 millimeters from 150 millimeters to 200 millimeters. And actually, the mirrors do look quite a lot larger on the cars. And this is a good change because, you know, we've seen instances of where it looks like the driver should have seen someone behind them or maybe slightly towards their blind spot, and they haven't. and hopefully that improves the situation there. Double the amount of sprint events. I'd love to know your opinion on this. Do you enjoy the sprint events? Now, I feel like it's a little bit skewed because the ones at Interlagos have been immense, but I feel I'm kind of the opinion those have been brilliant, and then some others just really haven't. So yeah, they've doubled the amount. So we've got 6: Baku, Red Bull Ring, Spa, Losail, Circuit of the Americas, and Interlagos. And they've been chosen following extensive research into their suitability. Meanwhile, sprint accident damage allowance will now be fixed per team for each weekend that includes a sprint race. The forfeit allowance for each sprint race will double to 300k from 2023 onwards, while all other sprint damage allowances will be removed. Alongside this, Parc Fermé rules on sprint weekends are under review for 2023 with the aim of simplifying the setup locking process after the FIA cited a significant increase in Parc Fermé requests between Friday's qualifying session and Saturday's sprint. Now, if you're a newcomer to Formula One, Parc Fermé is normally after practice 3, and what that means is setups are locked. You can only make reliability changes and a couple of selected setup changes. I think it's front wing and brake bias and maybe a couple of others instead of full suspension changes and all this kind of stuff. A lot of stuff is locked. You can't change roll bars or anything like that. So they're looking at how they can change this Parc Fermé. And I think normally Parc Fermé is before the sprint race, and then it makes practice 3 a little bit redundant. I could be incorrect on that, though. Please do let me know. I'm trying to remember while I'm recording this. But the sprint race allowance up to 300k might see some teams taking more of a risk in the sprint events. Could be interesting. Paddock working hours cut. The number of hours worked by F1 team members across the race weekends will be reduced in the upcoming season, with the third of 3 restricted periods effective on Fridays, beginning an hour earlier this year and another hour set to be knocked off in 2024. To complement this, the number of curfews permitted for the first Wednesday and second Thursday restricted periods will also be cut in half from 8 to 4 and 6 to 3 respectively, again with another cut planned in the next year. So that's basically, I don't see this as a bad thing at all. It means that the mechanics and staff and things like that can do all-nighters. There are many instances of teams and whatnot having to work through the night. I mean, the issue you've got is if someone totals a car, and I guess the curfews are extended working hours that they're allowed a certain amount per year. But I think that's a good thing with the addition of more. Well, there isn't one this year, actually, is there? Because we've lost China. But as they look to increase more rounds, reducing the working hours on top of the travel and things like that. I know it's the job and things like that, but, you know, I don't think it's a bad thing, and it will reduce costs and stuff anyway. Qualifying format and DRS trials. Now, this is quite a big one. A revised qualifying format, RQF, will take place at up to 2 events in 2023 for the purpose of evaluating whether the revisions are suitable for subsequent championships as per the updated regulations. This will see tyre compounds mandated for each stage of F1's usual 3-part qualifying session. Hard tyres only in Q1, medium tyres only in Q2, and finally soft only in Q3. Intermediates and wets will be allowed if the RQF sessions are declared wet. At RQF events, each driver may use no more than 11 sets of dry weather tyres, 4 sets of intermediate tyres, and 3 sets of wet weather tyres. This compares to the normal weekend allowance of 13 sets of dry tyres, 4 sets of intermediate, and 3 sets of wet. As for DRS, its activation after the start and race restart or safety car restart will also be evaluated, with the F1 Commission exploring the possibility of bringing this forward by 1 lap at the start of the race or sprint or safety car restart. This will be trialed during each sprint session of 2023 with a view to introducing it for all races in 2024. So this qualifying trial, in short, Q1 hard tyres, Q2 medium tyres, Q3 soft tyres, and a reduction in general on the number of sets of tyres to be used. This, I believe, is to combat wastage and lack of use. Now, again, if you're new to Formula One, even though you've got soft, medium, hard tyres, there actually are 5 compounds, and the tyres are picked along that range. So you might take a bunch of hard tyres to a track as an option that never get used, or one set of tyres get used. In the event of this happening, there will be much fewer tyres going to a race weekend, and they will all get used as well. So the wastage, they'll probably have quite a strict shelf life on these tyres as well. What do you think to those changes? I'd be interested to know your opinions. And also the DRS activation, bringing that forward 1 lap. Tweaks around gearbox changes. While changes to teams' homologated gearboxes were only previously permitted to resolve reliability problems or for cost saving for the start of each season, modifications are now permitted in the case of materials, processes, and proprietary parts becoming unavailable. Nonetheless, documentation justifying the change must be provided in all cases. So I guess this is to do, the modification must not give any performance advantage. So I guess this is to do with supply chain. If a certain, a certain part becomes unavailable and they have to switch suppliers and things like this, then that has to be declared. They can change things, but it has to be declared. And a summary of the modification will then be circulated to all teams. So if a change has to be made, they're allowed. No performance gain can be obtained from it, and then everyone has to be notified. A move to clear up a penalty confusion. Grid penalties came under spotlight at last year's Italian Grand Prix. I've not read this, so I thought I'd read through it. Where a host of drivers took power unit and gearbox related drops and turned the order of the grid on its head. Following some confusion over how these were applied, the wording of the regulations has been updated. The relevant section now reads, classified drivers who have accrued more than 15 cumulative grid position penalties, or who have been penalised to start at the back of the grid, will start behind any other classified drivers. Their relative position will be determined in accordance with their qualifying classification. So, if someone qualifies on pole and gets 15 position penalties, they will start behind any other classified driver. I'm trying to make sense of that in my own head. Classified drivers who have accrued more than 15 grid position penalties or have been penalised to start at the back of the grid, yes, will start behind any other classified driver. Okay, so if you're back of the grid, you are back of the grid, but your relative position is on your qualifying position. So even if you get 16 grid position penalties, you'll be back of the grid, I think. But then if, say, Max qualifies on pole, Lewis qualifies on second, and then they both get 16 positions grid penalty, Max will be ahead of Lewis. I think that's what that means. Yeah? So that's how I understand that. Again, correct me in the comments if you think I've got my understanding incorrect. I'm completely open to being incorrect about that. More flexibility to cool fuel. A small change on paper could have an impact on reliability in 2023, particularly at hotter races, with some extra freedom being given to teams regarding cooling of fuel. For 2023, fuel in the car must not be colder than the lowest, either 10 degrees centigrade below ambient temperature or 10 degrees centigrade, thus being cut from 20 degrees at any time when the car is running after leaving competitors' designated garage area. Now, I won't pretend I know anything about fluid dynamics or anything like that, but cooler fuel is denser fuel, so maybe they can get more into the tank, and maybe cooler fuel makes the engines run better, but they can only cool the fuel to 10 degrees below ambient temperature. So if it's 23 degrees ambient that can only go to 13 degrees ambient. Again, let me know in the comments if you have a better understanding of that than me. And what could follow in 2024? A significant overhaul of a roll hoot safety test is planned for next year. Discussions around grid penalties will continue, and potential removal of tyre blankets for 2024. What do you think to these changes, guys? Are you happy with these changes? Do you think they're sensible changes? What do you think to the DRS and qualifying changes? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you very soon. Cheers.